Welcome to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. We interview great guests who inspire you to overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Be sure you visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, just relax as you listen. You can do something else, but be ready to make an important note. And let's get started.
The title of this interview is Let's Blow Your Mind: Money, Drugs, Sex, and Hypnosis. What is lurking in your subconscious? My guest is Wendi Friesen, and she is a worldwide leader. Welcome, Wendi.
Thank you, Tony.
She is a worldwide leader in creating rapid change for life's difficult problems. Since 1994, her site at Wendi.com, that's with an I, Wendi.com, has influenced the lives of millions worldwide and brought insight, wisdom, and spiritual growth to people in need. Often described by her colleagues as a powerful healer, teacher, and the creative marketing expert, she is one of the most loved transformational trainers in the world. As a flat, broke single mother of two with no resources, money, help, or partners, she created a transformation business for devoted followers who seek real change. Her work caught the attention of the media, and she quickly became an authority on how to make rapid and massive change in your mind, body, and spiritual life. Wendi.com, again, that's Wendi, grew to experience millions in sales in a short time, reaching the hearts and minds of people who understood how her sincerity and passion could transform their lives. And with all that done, I give you Wendi Friesen.
Hi, Tony. Wow, what an introduction. Thank you. I'm so excited to meet you. And we have some things in common that we might be talking about. But of course, my passion for 27 years has been hypnotherapy. And I just stumbled into it by accident because in Sacramento, my current business was closing. And I was reading the classified ads on the last day. And there's one little classified ad that said hypnotherapy school. And it was just the tiniest little thing. I called them, had no idea what it was. They said it starts tonight. And I did. How divine intervention is that?
Wow. And I love how it's like no procrastination. It was time to act. It's like it was definitely the God's planning. It's like, okay, no time for you to get fearful and back out. You went for it.
That's interesting because that's one of the characteristics I have that I learned from my father. He was an entrepreneur all his life. Well, he's a preacher first, but an entrepreneur. When he wanted to do something, he was on it right now. He's got to get the information as fast as he can to see if it's viable or not.
I found that thinking is a great thing, a necessary thing, an essential thing, an awesome thing. But very often, given too much time, our thinking goes down a road of fear, and paralysis. So it pays to not spend too much time thinking to avoid that detriment.
Yeah, probably keep the momentum going by looking at the things that you want and what part of it gets you excited. So my work with people who are having fear of success, fear of failure, feeling stuck, they have projects they want to do, but they've run out of energy. We look for the positive intention behind being stuck or fearful or not worthy. For me, when I was starting out, I was definitely not worthy of wealth, and I didn't know that. And no matter how much I wished for it and hoped for it, when I did the work to ask my inner mind what the positive reason was for being poor, the answer was shocking.
What was it?
It said, I need you to be pitiful. And that didn't seem like a very positive reason. And it hurt. And even saying it now hurts. And I said, okay, thank you. Even deeper. Why do you need me to be so poor? And it said, I need you to be more pitiful. And those were not answers I would have come up with in my conscious thinking.
That's
and I
great.
said, thank you. And then I said, even deeper, why do you need me to be more pitiful? And the part said, because then somebody will rescue you. I had an agenda to be rescued? Me? I mean, previously I had had some successful businesses and done some cool things, but that was not coming from my conscious thought. I didn't make that up. It was coming from that inner information, that mysterious place, that was the deal. When I cleared that up, my financial life changed. I then made an affirmation and put it on this little Post-it note that said, by August of next year, which was 1 year away, I will have made 1 million or more in sales on my website and my business. And I will move into my beautiful brand new house. And while neither of those was possible, not even remotely, I put it on the monitor of my computer, the little Post-it note. So I saw it every day. And then I went into the future, imaginary future in hypnosis to 1 year in the future. I saw it and all these happy people that I had helped and all these, oh my gosh, just the feeling that I had done this for so many people and helped them and inspired them. 1 year later, my business had done $1,012,000, which is like pretty darn close.
That is fabulous. Nothing like getting honest with yourself. I recall when I read Conversations with God in the 90s, which was an awesome book. When, the Neil Donald Walsh, the author, purports that the God is, half the author. And I don't dispute that. Anyway, aside from that, so he has this conversation with God and he asks God, why do I do all this messed up shit over and over? And God said, well, when you're done with it, then you can move on to the next thing. And you were, it seems to me, using a parallel to that book or not, that you got honest with yourself and you said, oh my God, pity is what I wanted. And then you said, well, time to move on after you had this honest assessment of yourself.
Yeah. And it's getting that hidden information out that I love with hypnosis, because you don't get it from all your cognitive thinking and you're hoping and dreaming and writing down stuff. You're not going to get out of that nitty gritty stuff that's in there. And for me, I remember so well just crying after I found out that a part of me wanted me to be rescued. But then when you're going into your imaginary future, after you've cleared up the issues, though, you've got to get those out of the way, then you can let your mind absorb the events of the future as real memories, and it stores them as real memories. And it doesn't know the difference between a real and an imagined event. We do consciously, but our subconscious accepts it. So now it has a belief that, oh, look what I did. And on that week in August, the same week that I wrote that Post-it note, I opened the door to a beautiful brand new house that I had bought that same week, 1 year later.
Wow. So you created this business that was so successful, so impactful, and you got yourself a nice house and home out of the deal too. You really changed things when.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that it did, because my subconscious had a belief that it had already happened, that I got really brave and I did some things that I wouldn't probably have done. And I didn't shut down. I didn't get lazy. Every day I went out and went to businesses and talked to people and made phone calls. I called a radio station in Sacramento, a big talk radio station, and said, hi, I'd like to have my own radio show. And they said, oh, well, here, you can talk to Paul Lyle. He's our morning show host. So he happened to be right there. She gives him the phone and he says, why don't you come on the show on Monday morning, come in at 6 a.m. in the studio and I'll have you on. And I was terrified. I had never done anything like that. But that was an example of me taking a brave step to do something ridiculous that worked out. And then I went in there and I was on the air for 3 hours in the studio. Oh my gosh, it was great. It was so many callers. It was amazing. My business transformed in that one day.
He or she who dares wins. You are the living proof of it. That is fantastic. Well, it's, you are quite an accomplished change worker, and I'm a junior compared to you in terms of what you've done in that field and your career. But one of the things that I really, and I'm a recovering addict. I know that's one of your specialties, and we'll get into that. And I use the term recovering addict. You can call it recovered addict, someone who fixed themselves sufficiently, whatever. Been clean, sober over 20 years now.
Wow.
And some of the things I hear, a very common misconception or statement or an idea that people have is that, oh, there are people in the 12-step rooms that, use the disease model, which is fine. But then I hear people in the public who don't know much about it. They'll say, oh, someone consciously chose it. And I think there's really between the two is more the truth, is that people may have chosen it, but not consciously, unconsciously. That's where the real power is. That's what really directs us, the unconscious of ourself. And that in that regard, this is my contention. Yeah, a person can unconsciously make themselves an addict. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, so much of what you're saying is true. You know that I don't believe there is a disease behind alcoholism or addiction, but is it a disease when we have hardwired our brains to have these reactions that occur anytime that you're sad, feeling low, you see someone else drinking, and it instantly just activates the addiction aspect of it. So just the word disease, let's just not use it and look at what else is happening to make that a problem. A lot of my clients who are quitting drugs or alcohol, they don't have to set a date. They don't have to have willpower. They don't have to go, I got this, I can do it. We do 2 or 3 sessions together. Usually I do them like each day. We do them every day for 10 days. But about the 3rd day, they said, I didn't drink today. I just didn't feel like it. It wasn't a big deal. And I didn't want to. And then they don't. And so a great example, Ken, who is awesome. He said, I'm 45 and I'm just a fat slob drunk. That's all I've ever been. And now my friends know that. And I am a fat slob drunk. So he's starting the program. And on the 2nd day, he goes 1 year in his future. And he called me up and he said, I am an athlete in my future. That makes no sense because I've never done anything athletic, but I'm an athlete. I was having fun. You said, what are you passionate about? And all of a sudden I'm like running marathons and stuff. This makes no sense. So I said, well, just see what happens. It's okay to play around with that a little bit. He started training at 45 years old to be an Iron Man, went to competitions all over the world.
That's triathlon, right?
Yes. Qualified for the Hawaii Ironman and competed in it. He's still doing that 20 years later. And he didn't have to quit drinking. He didn't have to say, okay, that's it, I'm not drinking. He says, about a month later, I saw in my fridge, there was a 6-pack of beer because he used to drink over a case of beer a day. And he says, there was a 6-pack of beer in my fridge all this time. I never even noticed it. So I opened a can and I poured a glass and I just looked at it and it meant nothing to me. It nothing. I didn't drink it or anything.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Neutralize the struggle so that it's not a thing.
We could probably talk about this for hours, especially you and I.
Yeah.
Hours and hours. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsor, and we're going to come back and then we'll try to keep the format because I already can tell the kind of banter that we can have could go off in any tangent, or at least in the things that we have in common. And that is a big one right there. So let's take a quick moment to hear from our sponsor and we'll be right back with Wendi Friesen.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Proficio, perhaps the most common method that coaches worldwide use to get undisputable results for their clients is NLP. Visit www.proficio.io. That's proficio.io, where you can make the changes you want and get the results you dream of.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with Wendi Friesen, and we're going to stop talking about addiction for a moment, and let's talk about some of the things that I want to speak with Wendi about. And what about the bad hypnosis that is out there?
Oh boy. I had someone who asked me about a session on YouTube that they were listening to, and it was to stop smoking. And anybody can put a hypnosis session on there. And I said, well, I'll give it a listen. And I listened to it, and it was having you envision your lungs being black and sick and full of tar, and imagining you dying in the hospital and your family is all there watching you die, and you feel so guilty and you feel terrible about what you've done to yourself. And it went on and on with all this negativity. When we do work to, like, let's say, heal a condition in someone's body, we're creating positive imagery. We're getting the brain to activate all the healing things, not telling you that you're diseased and that your lungs are dying, because that could actually lead to more lung issues. But this was so bad. And I thought, well, that's called aversion therapy. And aversion therapy is dangerous. And I didn't realize that there was so much bad hypnosis on the internet. Got to be careful about the stuff on YouTube. People are just trying to get hits. And you
Now,
don't know if there's suggestions in there that aren't worded right because our subconscious is very literal.
now I'm a 55-year-old punk rocker. I used to have a big old mohawk, sing for a punk band. I like aversion therapy, but then again, I'm not a hypnotherapist or even a therapist at all. I was a coach. So I like it, but I would only do it with a lot of thought behind it, and only as part of a push-pull situation. But so I wouldn't even do it unless a lot of thought went into it. But I trust what you're saying, that you could easily cause harm if you mess up with that, and if you're not careful and cautious and mindful about putting negative thoughts and images in people's minds that they can manifest.
Yeah. Well, and another example is Tony Robbins, who has been a big inspiration to a lot of people. And I have loved him through time, but I was at one of his live seminars with 2,000 people. And at one point, while our eyes were closed and he had done some process on us, we're all standing up. And then he says, now put your arm up, make a fist and put your arm up in the air. And make sure that what you're seeing at the end of your arm when you open your eyes is me on stage. So here we're making a fist and we open our eyes and we're supposed to line him up with that fist. Well, me being a hypnotherapist, the next things he said were shocking because he was connecting us with him for all of our happiness, all of our joy, all of our accomplishments, making sure we were looking right at him and staring at him. And the arm being up kept us just more riveted and gave us a reason. But he was linking all the things that are good that we're going to create as a result of him. And
so you found that you think it was unethical.
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. But the other weird thing that happened at that same seminar was earlier on, he did a future timeline session. And I'm sitting there in my chair with my eyes closed. I'm all relaxed. And he's saying, and now float up out of that moment in the present and and he's got this wording right. And all of a sudden I went, what? That's my words. Those are my words. That's my future timeline process. And
he was using your script?
Huh?
He was using your script?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say 80% of his thing with that future timeline was my script. And then it gets to the end and then he's saying, now float up above that and notice it from above and notice, that. But it was like,
oh my God. I mean, that's, homage to you, but geez.
Although a lot of us have similar ideas and wording and different things. And if there was a little bit of wording in there, that'd be one thing. But it was like a lot of it was. But anyway, that's just a little whatever. I don't even know what to think.
Well, I imagine there's a lot of stealing, quote unquote, stealing in the change work field. I mean, it's practically inevitable. But then again, Tony Robbins is worth like $400 million. I don't know how many millions you got, Wendi. Maybe you guys should have a little conversation. But, no, I'm pretty sure you're a practitioner of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, right? So am I. Certainly Robbins came out of it, and then he made his own thing, which is really the way to go, right? You got to be proprietary. It's where it's at. And indeed, when I made my virtual coaching program, Proficio, it was based in NLP, and I use visualization because that is where it's at. We got to live into the image that we want to have. And that's a very important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And once you clear up whatever identity issues and beliefs about yourself from the past, you got to clear those up first. Otherwise, you're going to have a conflict of imagining who you are becoming and who you are into the future. And if you have some self-sabotage issues, those need to be cleared up. Once you do that, we can create this really clear and powerful vision of who we are in the future, which the future is like, right now, but also a year from now.
Always, and then the future always, right?
Yeah, and we can do things differently. But if you try to just like you make affirmations and you visualize and you do all this stuff and it's not working and you don't know why, well, what if you still have issues with being unworthy? And that's what you grew up with. What if you made a lot of mistakes in some previous jobs or businesses and they failed? Now you are a failure and you're coming from these beliefs. So
Absolutely.
we've got to clear those before all that visualizing is going to have an effect.
When I first began my successful recovery from addiction, I found that was the most important hurdle, was this self-esteem issue, this being worthy of someone that deserves good things, that deserves recovery. Because until I got past that, it was the same sabotage over and over again. Why should I do all this if I'm not worth it? And the answer was I wouldn't do it until I became worth it in my own mind. Then that was a game changer, and other things.
Yeah. So for the audience listening, hear what he said. If you need to rewind it and listen to that again, that's very, very important, that especially with addiction, if you don't get that worthiness, and you just can't instantly go, okay, I'm worthy,
No.
you got to look at where the issues are. And that's what's being activated in your subconscious mind. Every time you think about, I got to quit drinking, boom, your brain goes to the unworthiness, mistakes I've made, I deserve to be punished. You go into grocery store, and there's an aisle with liquor, and you immediately get triggered that, oh, I've got to have that. And you again energize that unworthiness. And what I've done with my addiction work is I've really gotten rid of that, but changed people to have a different reaction and a different trigger. If they see alcohol, think about alcohol or drugs, drive by a bar. So I was in a grocery store in Sacramento, and this woman stopped me and she said, oh my God, Wendi, I have to tell you what happened. So I used your alcohol freedom program. She says, now I haven't drank for months, but now when I'm in the grocery store and I go through the aisle with the wine and the liquor, because I feel like dancing, I'm so happy because that doesn't have any pull on me. She says, I really feel like dancing. So we've changed the trigger. Instead of it triggering her to feel like, oh God, I can't buy a bottle of wine. Oh my God, I just can't do it. Instead of that, she's just subconsciously just, whoa, filled with joy.
Changing triggers and reframing or changing anchors is just, collapsing anchors, as they say in NLP. That's a very important thing. And, we can do so much with ourselves, and really always ultimately comes down to ourselves. But when you have someone who really knows what they're doing, like Wendi, or me to a lesser degree, it can really make the difference, just being guided. I mean, ultimately, you, the person, are responsible. No one will ever get you clean or do anything else for you, for that matter. But having someone in your corner that's an expert, that can see the bigger picture, that knows a couple of things, that is, it's really indispensable. I wanted to mention one thing about feeling esteem. I recall, when I was in the 12-step groups, I was in AA and NA, and I haven't been a member for a long time. But one of the the suggestions is to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, which is a universal. Yeah. And, and it was one thing I never could do, but I finally did it. And I always wanted to, but I never did. And then until I finally pulled it off. And then one day at the end of those 3 months that I did those 90 meetings in 90 days, I looked in front of the mirror and I had this weird feeling. I was like, what is this feeling? I feel this feeling. I don't know. It was foreign to me. I was like, is this like a flashback of some drug use? No, it wasn't. I realized that it was a feeling of liking myself, because I had kept my word to myself. It doesn't matter what it was. It was something that was not easy to do. Okay. 90 to 90, which seems a lot. Mm-hmm. It is. But I liked myself in this regard, which is recovery from addiction, which was it's a life-changing thing. I gotta say, I'm a practitioner of NLP, a coach, an entrepreneur. I'm into all these philosophies, psychologies. They're great. But the most profound thing I ever did for myself was to get clean and sober, which is to clear my mind from all these things which pollute it, and keep my wits about myself, and have that accumulate over years. That was the most.
And then you get prouder and prouder of yourself for accomplishing all these goals, even if they're small ones or big ones, and finding that feeling is no longer there and you're no longer battling with it. So you can let go of some of the feelings of weakness or doubt and being scared that you're always going to go back to it. And that's what, with NLP and hypnosis, we can get a person to not have to worry about going back. It's not how many days you've been clean or sober. It's that you are, and it's done. But here's the thing about the 90 meetings in 90 days. And if you're a person out there and you're doing that and it's working, that's great. But here's what I feel. When you're in those meetings, you're listening to a lot of sad stories. When you're listening to these sad stories of hope or struggle or failures or relapses, whatever they are, it's energizing your own memories that have the same emotions as that in your brain. So for 90 days, you're energizing these memories of struggle, of fear of that I can't do it, and making mistakes in your life, and people talking about, I stole from my mother. I would go into a room and just take whatever cash I could find. Well, your own brain is going to go to times when you were unscrupulous and you stole from people or you took advantage of people. So igniting those memories, like with your NLP work, if we ask somebody to think about those things every day for 90 days, oh my God, it just,
I'm the first one to say that 12-step recovery is great if you can do it. It's ripe with pitfalls and dangers, and it's a minefield. So you got to be careful. I think that, well, I'm not poo-pooing it. I think that I've already mentioned that there's nothing like having someone who knows what they're doing to be your guide. That's especially a professional and it has a history and a resume of success. Nothing like that. Okay, let's take a quick break and we'll come right back with Wendi Friesen.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perficio. When Ben Franklin arrived in Philadelphia, all he had was 10 cents in his pocket. Despite this, he became America's first self-made man. Visit www.perficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io to actually have the knowledge and principles of Ben Franklin transferred into yourself.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with Wendi Friesen. And I want to ask Wendi, how do you wake up and feel better, different, and courageous in your life? And whether it be, that's not for you and for everyone else.
Okay, it's actually pretty easy to explain. And for people who are feeling like they wake up in the morning with a feeling of dread, or they review what they didn't do yesterday and what's looming, uncomfortable things they need to do. When I started out, one of my biggest lessons was about a really uncomfortable thing I had to take care of. I was really new at this, but my tanning salons, I had 2 of them, and I owed money in taxes and payroll taxes. So the IRS man would come to my front door at my house and say, "Got any money today?" And I said, "No, I still don't have any." And I was just so scared to try and figure this out and figure out how to pay it off. And I didn't want to confront the issue. And even now, 28 years later, my stomach hurts when I talk about it. It's weird. And so I had to get myself to be courageous and to wake up the next morning on whatever morning it was, and that I was going to fully 100% just take it head on. I imagined myself doing that, but more than that, I imagined the feeling that I would have afterwards. So I put myself going through the steps, going down to Sacramento to the office of the IRS and everything, saying, "Here we go, what do I do?" And coming back home and going, "Oh." And then I also had a couple of years taxes that I hadn't filed. So I imagine myself getting those all finished, putting them in an envelope, because back then we had, stamps and envelopes, and licking the stamps and sealing it up and going to a big blue post office or a box, whatever, putting it in there, and then imagining myself dancing and having fun and going, "Yeah." Now, this was a very simple, quick thing that I did with both of these issues. But what it did is it made my brain create a very motivated piece of brain that wanted that feeling so much. I wanted that feeling more than I wanted the current feeling of dread and feeling stuck. And I was on automatic. I just got up and I started working on it and I got it done, went to a tax attorney to get a couple years of taxes handled and remove all the fines and things and the payroll taxes, cleared it all up, was done within days. And getting that feeling that you want is going to motivate you and drive you. If you do it before you go to sleep at night, when you wake up in the morning, it's going to be a different day. You're going to feel like, "Oh, I'm getting out of bed." Because I used to not get out of bed. I used to stay in bed till like 9 or 10 o'clock. And then all of a sudden, I'm up when the sun comes up because I'm ready to go. Now, my days aren't always like that. Even now, I'm human. I got shit.
Oh, no, you're human. Oh, we wanted an infallible hero.
Yeah, I have. Oh God, life just has so many things that, that we got to deal with, but knowing what to do with them and how to be resourceful and how to reframe these things
I
into
love what
something.
you said about you talk about these visualizations and there's 100 other things, but even when I was an addict, this is a recurring theme with us because we know so much about it. I don't say that with big egos, we just because that's our, we have a lot of experience. But I had a lot of experience as an addict, and I had a lot of experience as a recovering addict. But as an addict, I recall, I wanted to get into change work, but I was so much of a mess that I had to work on changing myself before I could seriously think about it. And what I found myself doing, when I would imagine myself going out and getting the drugs and doing it. And you know what happened every time I went out? I did exactly that. It's a funny thing that I went and I spent $300 on Coke again tonight, and I'm enough for 2 days, and and then so when I learned NLP and some hypnosis, I found that that's what I would, by visualizing that's exactly and living it, I can do the opposite, and I can get the miracle, and get the life that I want. Sometimes people need a miracle, right?
Yeah,
How do they get a miracle?
And it's interesting. You brought up the cocaine thing because back in the 80s, I was doing a lot of cocaine, and it was getting really rough because
it was good for you back then.
Whew, oh. Anyway, I finally decided, there was a day where I decided that I am never, ever, ever, ever doing this again. And that's negative, but I wasn't, doing this kind of work back then.
Right.
And if someone mentions it, or if someone talks about it, I am immediately walking away. And I envision myself just walking away right in the middle of any conversation if someone alludes to it in any way. So I felt like I was subconsciously removing myself from any aspect of it. And I did quit. That was it. And that was, it was a tough thing to do, as you know. But there are lots of people who can relate to that from the 80s and early 90s. Oh my God. Oh.
And I'm sure a lot, contemporarily, and that's one of the things, by the way, when we look at society as a whole and the global society, I don't think there's really evolution. And I measured that primarily with addiction. There seems to be more and more addiction, per capita. And I think that's a sign of de-evolution, quite frankly. I'm sure that, of course, you can put other metrics in there, but to me, that's a glaring one. It's a glaring metric. What do you think about that? Or am I just a pompous idiot?
Right. Well, I don't know if this is related to what you're saying about evolution, but I've kind of decided that aliens created us. It's not a result of evolution, because when I go diving in the ocean, there's no way that evolution could have created all of this all these creatures.
Octopus is the best.
Yeah, I know. I love that one. So these kids in school on alien planets, their assignment was, I want you to create the environment in an ocean that will support this kind of sea life. I want you to create the trees that are going to support these kind of animals, and you're going to make the animals. So they created all of this and all of us, right? And that's why there's so much diversity. The reason we're seeing UFOs is because they're coming to check their homework, see how it's going. And they're going like, wow, those squid, they totally change color at the same time. Good job.
Totally.
So those humans, they're doing exactly what you wanted them to do.
I concur. I really, I think that there most probably was an alien intervention, because we break the mold. And the world is so complex and wonderful. It's just it's incredible. All right, I don't want to even get I don't want to lose my mind with that one. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and we'll move on to other topics. Okay,
to the aliens.
Again, we could talk for hours. I'm seeing that. That's obvious. All right, quick break.
Yeah.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Proficio. When people learn something, they want to use it so it has real value. And the best teacher is experience. Visit www.proficio.io That's PERFICIO.io, where Proficio will have you taking action. With what you're learning immediately, you'll be closer to your goals before you even realize it.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with Wendi Friesen, and we're going to continue with that last topic, continuing about miracles. How does hypnotherapy actually create miracles? Let's use that word. Let's continue with that word.
For me, when I was new at my hypnotherapy practice, I was seeing clients and they would come in with conditions that I'm like, I wouldn't tell them that, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do because I was really new. And I had several mentors that I could call on the phone and get help from and stuff. But one woman had been going to a psychologist for 2 years, every week for 2 years. She was depressed and she was about 30 years old. She says, I've been depressed for so long and nothing's working, nothing's helping. So me, being fairly inexperienced, worked with her. We did 4 sessions. And after the 4 sessions, she says, my depression lifted after our first session, but now I'm like a new person. I'm not depressed. I'm excited about life again. And I just feel like this is the real me. Well, me not even understanding it created a miracle with her. I don't know the exact mechanism, except that our body is listening to us all the time, every part of our body, every cell, every organ. So this woman listens to a session of mine called Disc of Light, which is just to imagine this disc above your head that has all this power and information and flowing energy. And I have you slowly move it down through your body. And it removes any harmful cells, harmful bacteria, any cells that are not supposed to be there, such as cancerous cells. And it releases them. It goes all the way down to bottoms of your feet. And then you start again with another disc. She says, after I listened to that, I started feeling really weird and I didn't feel very good. And my belly started hurting. She said, I went and got in the bathtub and I passed a tumor from my uterus. A tumor, a small one, but she says, I knew I had the tumor there and I was going to have surgery, but I passed this tumor. Like, what?
Incredible.
A woman
I would say that is miraculous.
It is that we can do that.
That must have blown you away. I mean,
totally. Oh, there's thousands of things that have blown me away. One of them that is one of my favorite experiences is a woman named Martha who was about 55 years old, and she had been kind of catatonic for 2 years. She was living in her house with her 2 adult daughters. She couldn't move any part of her body. Her eyes were open and she could see, but she couldn't move anything else. And so they fed her with a feeding tube and they were taking care of her, but 2 years she hadn't moved. So her hands were just all clenched up tight and her legs and joints were so tight. So I sat beside her and I did a session that was just telling her a story about this beautiful little creek in a meadow and this blanket that was pink and yellow that she put down on the ground. And she put her feet in the little stream and felt the coldness of that water on her feet. And then I said, oh, and there's someone coming down that little path on the hill. And I was describing 2 girls. And they came and sat down with her. And I said, now you're making daisy chains out of the little flowers, because I wanted her brain to reignite little tiny movements. So anyway, finished that. And after I was done, the 2 adult daughters were in the room and they said, how did you know all that? I said, what do you mean? She says, that's exactly where my mother took us. And that's what we would do, is make daisy chains. The blanket was pink and yellow, the little stream, right? I said, I don't know. I just described what I was seeing. Well, anyway, next week I go to their house and wow. Martha raised her eyebrows when I walked in the room. And we did another session. The next week when I came in, she smiled. She could move her mouth and smile and raise her eyebrows. So now her hands were clenched really tight. And I said, I want you to imagine that each of your fingers is a color of Play-Doh. Remember Play-Doh that you used to play with your daughters when they were little? And I would touch her fingers and I said, this one is blue and this one's yellow. And her fingers weren't moving, but I said, Play-Doh is so soft, and it's so easy to move it. So then I come back next week and her fingers can move. And so I said, lift this finger for yes. And she lifts the first finger of one hand, and then the other hand, I said, lift this one for no. She was doing it. Now she could communicate with yeses and nos. And so over the period of 2 or 3 months, her body, I got her body to be flexible enough that they could sit her up, put her in a wheelchair and take her for walks, take her to town, do things with her. And she was doing great. She was doing really, really well. A few months later, they called me and said she has an infection in her entire body and she's in the hospital and she has a breathing tube. And they said when they take it out, she's going to die. Can you go there and do something? And I said, well, I don't really know anything about this, but I'm courageous. So I went to the hospital and I sat with her in the intensive care with my face right next to her. And I said, Martha, you and I both know that you know how to breathe. You've always known how to breathe. And when they take that tube out, it's like your body remembers when you were born and you took that biggest breath. And it was so easy and so natural. And you'll continue to breathe. And we both know that. A man walks in the room who is like, I don't know, an intern. He wasn't one of the doctors, intern or nurse or something. Or he comes in, he listens to what I'm doing, and he says, she's not going to breathe. She's going to die.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
Oh my gosh. So I said, Martha, he doesn't know anything. He's an idiot. You and I know that you're going to breathe. So I left. I spent about an hour and a half with her and I left. And then later that day, the daughter called me and said, they took the tube out and Martha's breathing. She took the biggest breath when they took it out and she's breathing on her own and doing good. So miracles.
Yes.
Oh, I got so
miraculous.
many of these. Like for the guy to come in and program into her mind that she's going to die. She's not going to breathe without any regard for what she's hearing.
Right. And there are a number of reasons why: his own ego, his own ignorance, you know, and in our field, we're very mindful of that. You know, everyone else is not in our field. But
there's some great miracles. Like I work with people for sexual issues a lot. And
okay, let's get into sex. We're going to come right back. We're going to keep our clothes on. When we come back from this quick commercial break.
Just getting right.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Proficio. The pandemic has painfully shown how we must have money put away. Not just for a rainy day, but for a whole bunch of them. You must accrue wealth to really be okay. Visit www.proficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can truly learn financial principles like never before so that you can have the future you really want and need.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with Wendi Friesen. Wendi, is there such a thing as sex?
Well, remember the aliens I was talking about earlier? Okay, one of the kids in the alien school, they said, your job is to make sure that humans have babies. You've got to give them some overwhelming desire and reason to want to create babies. Exactly. And they did the orgasm. It works pretty good.
They knew what they were doing.
But when people have trouble, like for men, trouble getting erections, and for women especially feeling really self-conscious about having an orgasm or being like in the moment, hypnosis is really, really good for that. It is amazing how you can change these sexual issues that maybe you got them when you were very young. Like a man who had premature ejaculation, he was now probably 30 years old, and he came in and talked to me about it and stuff. And we did a session on it, but then he said, oh, I remembered something when you were doing the session. I had a memory of when I was in high school, my girlfriend and I would go to her parents' house because they were gone and they didn't get home until whatever time from work. We'd have sex. And every time we were having sex, because she was worried about her parents coming home, she said, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. He says, I remember she said that constantly every time we had sex. And then we just released that. I told his mind that that isn't something that's valid or relevant in his life, and had him imagining being able to last as long as he wants and some other things. And he didn't have it anymore, even though he struggled with it for years, but we found the cause. And so for many
how long did it take to find that cause?
Oh, just the one session. And we worked on it for a couple more sessions just to make sure there wasn't anything else in the way. But people are funny. Like this one man I worked with for impotence, like 6 sessions or so. And finally we were like done. I said, I don't know what else to do. I don't know why this isn't working. He says, yeah, I know. It's so weird. Like, because he was married to this woman. And he says, whenever I have sex with my ex-wife, I get an erection just fine. And I'm like, what? What? Excuse me? You're having sex with your ex-wife and you don't know why you're impotent with your current wife. A lot of conflict that's going on there, but he never told me till the end. Whew.
He saved that for the finale, huh? Oh,
but okay, bye-bye.
So, I mean, so what was the outcome or your intervention?
Yeah, with him, I quit working with him because I thought that was just a little too extreme that he didn't be honest with me.
Right.
But typically we do want to find the cause. And we do want to find what is at the core. It could be a very early sexual experience, guilt from growing up. In my generation, I didn't even know that men had penises until I accidentally caught a glimpse of my dad in a bathrobe. And I was like, what's that?
What?
We were so protected and we had no idea what it was. And the first time I had an orgasm, I had no idea what that was. I don't know what this is. And other people, I don't even know that anybody's ever experienced this before.
Right.
We're so sheltered. So we grew up with a lot of issues, and we've got to clear up those issues and get a person back to the basics of their body, that your body is meant to have this pleasure and it's something that is your right and that you can experience it fully. And especially with women, I was a guest on a talk radio show where we were in the studio and they're looking at my book, Hypnotize Your Lover. I said, chapter 19, can you really do that? I said,
chapter 19, what's chapter 19?
It's for a woman to love giving head. So
wow.
To really love it and for her to get pleasure from giving him head. And I said, oh yeah, of course. Actually, in reality, I had never done that, but
wow.
But someone else told me they were using hypnosis for that. So I wrote a chapter about it of what I would do for that. And so they had 2 couples call into the radio show that were going to go to my office and let me do hypnosis on the 2 wives to make them love giving head. And I'm like, but it was fun. So they came in separately. And I did some work with them about the pleasure and increasing the pleasure. And then I anchored on their hands, on each part of their hand and fingers, anchored a different pleasure, something they loved, something they couldn't resist, something that was just so good. And then I connected that to their desire to give their husband pleasure. And apparently it worked. So on the next Monday, the 2 talk show hosts, Jack and Joe, they had the first guy call in and say, well, how'd it go? Or how are things with your wife? And he said, well, I'll tell you, boys, as a token of my appreciation for what Wendi did, if you go out into the parking lot, there's 2 brand new Corvettes. Keys are in them. Just a gift from me to you for what you did, which to my wife.
Wow.
There were no Corvettes, but it was just very funny. Like, that's how grateful he was. Wow. So the other woman, she came back for a couple more sessions and she said, I have a problem with what you did. I am loving giving my husband a blowjob, but I was really mad at him and we'd had a fight and I still wanted to give him head, even though we were having a fight.
Boy, talk about positive feedback.
Anyway, there you go.
Wow. Fantastic. I love it. Wendi, how are you on time? I mean, we could talk for hours, so I'm mindful of your time. How are you on time?
I'm good. I've got another half hour free with.
Okay, great.
That still gives me a break from.
We'll go a little bit longer than usual because we still got some more things I'd like to touch on or at least cover sufficiently, and I don't want to end it, unless we had to. And I'm good for time too. So great. I appreciate that very much. So before we continue with sex, let me circle back to addiction for a moment. Is there a hypnosis cure for addiction? I know I have a virtual coaching, this virtual coaching program, and I'm totally focused on self-help. That's our first market, our first stage. Later on, I'll be getting into addiction recovery. from my own experience and other people's work, like Richard Gray, maybe yours, and other leaders know what they're talking about. And I definitely want to include hypnosis because I know hypnosis works. I know from my own experience as a person being hypnosis, and I know from my colleagues, such as yourself, that it's extremely effective, to say the least. So now I'm asking you, is there a hypnosis cure for addiction?
Yeah, well, we don't use the word cure because that would imply that we are practicing medicine or curing a condition or disease in the body. So with hypnosis and NLP, we let go of the disease model. We don't have to fight to say it's not a disease or it is. We just let go of that. There is something that has helped people who were absolutely hopeless, were convinced that nothing would work because they've failed so many times. So what I did is I created a process of taking people through all the elements needed to end your addiction and make you solid about never struggling with it again and never having to struggle with your own thoughts. But it's a whole lot of things. You have to look at your identity as an addict when you've said this millions of times that, hi, I'm Wendi and I'm an addict. And what they're doing in rehabs that continues to energize your weaknesses. Like this one rehab that my oldest son went to was the very first one I'd taken him to. And I thought, oh, this is it. He's going to be cured. So they had a speaker who's a professional AA speaker that goes around to different rehabs. He stands up and says, hi, I'm George and I'm an alcoholic. And everybody says, hi, George. And he says, I got to tell you that for 20 years, I haven't had a drink. But every day I'm white knuckling it, hoping I'll make it to midnight. What he did right there was have them envision and feel and experience what it will be like in 20 years. And that every day they're going to be hoping to make it till midnight. Then, in a very cheerful voice, he says, you know, I remember on the airlines when they had the carts full of those little mini alcohol bottles, so I could steal 10 or 12 of those off the cart and I could just get rip-roaring drunk all for the whole flight. It was so great. So now he took them in NLP terms, you know, he took them into an experience to imprint them with the joy of getting drunk. I was shocked. And I'm thinking, well, of course, that's why rehab doesn't work. But when my son was leaving that rehab, he and a few of the other men, the director said, remember, in a month from now, only 1 in 12 of you will still be clean and sober. Wow. That's some powerful hypnosis. So in my program, I basically did the opposite of everything they're doing. And I had people get their worthiness, get rid of some of the identity issues and the worthiness and stuff from their childhood, then taking them into the future. Well, first they go into the future on this timeline that splits off. It has like kind of a T in the road or whatever, splits off to the right and to the left. And they do have to go down each one a little ways. And the one to the left is the path that they're on if they continue what they're doing in their life with drugs or alcohol. The one to the right is being completely free from it and feeling their creativity and their love of life and their pride in themselves. But when they do that and have that contrast, and then I have them come back to the point where the split in the two paths happened, and I have them choose, but I do it in a way that makes it such an impactful moment that they know what that path to the left is like. They've lived that their whole life or whole adult life maybe. But they want the other one so much that their brain flips a switch that says, yep, I'm all on, I'm all in this. So then I have other things like doing the parts therapy. Their positive reason for being an alcoholic or an addict. And we've got to work with that and find out what that is. And then going into these different future moments to get their brain to record a different memory about their life, something different, something they love about themselves, what they're accomplishing. And like I said, with Ken, a year in the future, he's an athlete. Who knew? But this was, my first client was a meth addict, and he had gotten kicked out of his house, couldn't see his wife or his kids. And we did some work together with these different elements that I have. And I didn't have it as a program back then, but he did about 6 sessions with me every week, came back to me 6 months later, walked into my office with a yellow silk rose, which I still have. And he said, I have been clean for 6 months. I know I'm never going back to it, but guess what? My wife took me back. I'm back with my family. I'm a good man and I'm doing a good job of raising my kids.
Fantastic.
So there's a lot of things. There's about 15 different sessions in my program, and you can do it self-guided on your own and just follow through on the course. There's a video every day, and the hypnosis sessions, you wake up to this session in the morning that's telling you, that you're creative or that you have something that you're inspired to do, and just different things. It doesn't have to be about the addiction. And it just takes you through the whole thing that heals a lot of parts of your life, but opens you up to something really good and something you want so much that you won't go back to the drugs or alcohol.
I love it. Let's take a quick moment to hear from our sponsor, and we'll be back with more talk about. I don't know if I want to talk about sex or more about addiction recovery, because they're both so fascinating. And we might get into something else. No, please don't let me get into something else.
Sailing.
That'll be another hour.
Sailing.
Right. Well, we haven't even mentioned sailing. We're both sailors, by the way, audience. So I go to the writing's already in the wall. Wording's already on the wall. Wendy's gonna have to come back for another interview, but let's just get through this one first. Okay, so let's take a quick moment to hear from our sponsor.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perficio. Perficio learns more about you as you make progress and then uses that information to help you even more. It is quasi-AI. Visit www.perficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can be helped by something that learns more about you, because that is the difference that makes the difference.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with Wendi Friesen. Wendi, are we done with addiction recovery talk now? Can we talk about sex, or is there more to talk about? I mean, I know there's more to talk about, but you want to move on? You want to talk more about it?
That's probably, it gives the people the idea of why it's not working. If you're not getting clean or sober with AA or rehab, it's not your fault. There's some very flawed aspects to it. Absolutely. That takes tremendous willpower to rise above it. So my son went to 5 different rehabs, residential rehabs, and he taught me every time he went to one. And he's the reason that I do the addiction work, because every time he went to one and I wrote a check for another $30,000 or whatever, right. I go, that's bullshit what they're doing. That's terrible. Right. That's not going to make a person change anyway. So yeah.
Well, when did your course come out, or your program? Because I'm wondering if there's anything new. When did your course come out?
Yeah, well, I started doing the addiction work about 15 years ago. And then this program that I'm using now is about 7 or 8 years that I created it, and I've updated it since. And I also do training for other therapists so that they can use this course with their clients.
Okay, great. So you've got it for the consumer, if you will, as well as continuing education for change workers.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, great. I love that. And now let's move on to some sex. All right. Ooh. By the way, if you're just listening, you got to tune into YouTube. Wendi is quite some eye candy, you got to check out YouTube. So let's talk more about how does hypnosis affect our sex lives? In terms of hypnosis before you meet a hypnotist.
Yeah. And a lot of people have issues, as I said, when I was young, I knew nothing about sex. I grew up as a kid of a preacher, and there were 5 kids in my family, and no one got talked to about sex at all. And back then there was no sex education, and your friends didn't talk about sex because it was just, we didn't know. So that's a lot of the problem. We weren't given information to grow up and love our bodies and say there's a really special thing about your body that happens and that you're going to be noticing, blah, blah, blah. I just, like I said, I had no idea that men had penises. I was like 12 years old and I caught a glimpse of one. I was like, what's that?
What do you think of Freud's theory of penis envy?
For women with penis, I would say it still exists and it still goes on.
I think it's true. I think a lot of what Freud, purported is true, or viable.
And for women with the sexual issues that I work with women on, a lot of them is about not being able to really relax and enjoy sex and to allow themselves to orgasm because they're nervous. They don't want to take too long, and we feel guilty because we're women, I guess. And so maybe penis envy comes a lot from that, because it just seems to us that men can function and they have an orgasm and we're good to go. So I did a process on a woman just to experiment by rubbing the back of her hand with my fingers and just going around in circles and creating this pleasure that she would experience that had to do with sexual pleasure. And then with each finger having a different element of the pleasure, and similar to what I did with the 2 guests on the radio that were on that radio show. But this one was just to get her to have an orgasm without any genital stimulation of any kind. And so I was just doing that, and she was enjoying herself. Clearly wasn't sure that she was actually, having that, but I continued to do this and continued setting the anchors on each of her fingers, and it really, really worked. And she ended up going to work for me in my customer service room. And every time I'd go in there, I'd take my hand and put it on the back of Jill's hand and say, "Oh, Jill, how are you doing today?" And I make little circles with my hand. Just stop that, because it still worked.
By the way, for those listening or watching, an anchor is a stimulation response. It's like classic conditioning. So she's able to elicit a feeling that she deliberately created called anchoring, which is a really cool thing.
Yeah. And the wording I would use, like one of the fingers was like a food that you really love to eat, something you love to taste that you want more of. And I would slide my finger down that one finger and saying it, and that feeling gets stronger and stronger. And you want that more and more, and continuing to increase the effect of this anchor. And the next one was, I don't know, there was a different one for each one. And it's on a video that shows you how to do it. But then I would take all of these at the same time by putting my hand over hers and saying, now all of those feelings all at the same time, they all come together right now. And you feel them all coming together. So there's this intense thing. And there are women that have orgasms without being touched genitally, but just by doing this process, someone doing this process on the back of their hand. And our brains are capable of doing that.
Yes, right? No, the brain is the most erotic organ there is, right? So
yeah.
Let's talk about the fear of hypnosis. Are people scared of hypnosis?
Yeah, a lot of people are. And when you go see stage shows, it looks so like weird and controlling and making people do stupid things. And I've done some stage shows, different events, and it's pretty weird. People do whatever I tell them to do because there's an expectation that they're supposed to do this.
Right.
And they're already pre-programmed. They know what's up. And they're either really susceptible or they're playing along, some, a little both. So fears of hypnosis, a lot come from that. And also some of the things you've seen on TV, maybe some older hypnosis stuff. One of the things I saw that should scare the crap out of everybody is Paul Mckenna, very famous hypnotist.
British.
He was on the Ellen show wanting to help her quit smoking. So he's doing a hypnosis session on the show live recorded, whatever. He told her to imagine that her lungs were black and diseased, and told her to feel that guilt that she has, that she can't quit smoking. And he had her imagine and visualize getting sicker and sicker because of the cigarettes. I was wanting to scream. That's not how you do it. And people should be afraid of hypnosis because this is a very famous, very skilled hypnotist doing something that's horribly dangerous. So you think you have a hypnotist who is good at what they're doing, but you should find out if they are really as good as they say, or if they use aversion techniques or do something dangerous. Like, that's dangerous. If you can pass a tumor out of your uterus with hypnosis, telling your lungs they're black and diseased is going to have an effect on them too.
Right.
So that's why some of it, you should be afraid of some of it, and don't let just anybody play around with your mind.
Right. So, I mean, a question you may ask a potential hypnotherapist is, do you use aversion therapy? And if they use it, you may want to go elsewhere.
Yeah, because that is dangerous, and you don't know what you're setting up in someone's subconscious or what you're getting to be triggered from some old memory because of the aversion therapy. But you do need to get to the cause of issues. That's much more important, is asking someone to go to the very first time they had that problem. And a woman that had migraines every Thursday, like horrible, debilitating migraines for a couple of years, her doctor sent her to me, and I asked her to go back to the first time she felt that feeling. And she's sitting in my chair, and all of a sudden she stops breathing, and it's like she's really not breathing, but she's struggling. Her head is shaking back and forth, and she's going, and she couldn't breathe. So I said, on the count of 3, when I touch your shoulder, you're going to take a nice breath. You're going to stay in that moment, but you're going to breathe and relax. 1, 2, 3. And I touched her shoulder. She took a really big breath. And I said, stay right there in that moment and tell me what you're experiencing, what's going on. And she said, my husband has his hands around my neck and he's trying to kill me.
Oh.
And we went through, just another Wednesday afternoon. So we went through that event. Went through that event. We released it in a way that it's a distant memory. It was wrong. It was horrible, but she can let that go. And now, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of that session, I said, and what day is it right now in that moment? And she said, it's Thursday. So her brain, her subconscious was triggering that fear every Thursday. And it brought up the migraine of when she was being strangled on that one day.
Wow.
But guess what? She never had a migraine again.
Fantastic.
Gone.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask my final question. Does hypnosis work for kids?
Oh my gosh. My favorite kid, 7-year-old Grant. Oh my gosh. He was a bedwetter, and all his life he had wet the bed. And so his mom brought him to me, and we did a couple of sessions. It was so, so sweet and so amazing that so after the second session, his mom called me up and she said, Grant wants to talk to you on the phone, hands him the phone. And he said, Wendi, this is the best day of my life. He was dry for the first time.
So that's a big yes.
Oh, it was so great. Yeah. And I continue to stay in touch, and he did great. But another man that took his kindergarten son to kindergarten every day, and the boy just cried and screamed, would not go in the door. He listened to my story. It's a story about a wizard taking the child to experience something about themselves in this really cool magical garden, and finding out that they have these other powers and abilities and stuff. So the story is different for every child because they're letting the wizard do whatever is applicable to them. Anyway, he says he listened to that story for a couple nights. And then when I took him to kindergarten, he just went in. He wouldn't even give me a hug. He said, bye, Dad. Wouldn't even say goodbye, hardly. And then the teacher said, he's now helping the other kids who are scared of kindergarten. He's helping them be brave and going. Fantastic. And the stories for the kids, I have stories for all kinds of problems that kids have that are recorded. And
you've seen many children.
Yeah. And it's fantastic. So, oh my God, it's so rewarding and amazing for them to get help now for things that they need help with. Like this little girl who's second grade, her mom said, don't say the word math. She has a math phobia. If you say the word math, she will bust into tears and she'll just cry. So don't say that word. So I did a session with her and said, I want you to go back, let your mind go back to the time when you found you had this fear of that with the numbers and the addition and subtraction and everything. So just go back to that time now. And she says, I'm in first grade or second grade. And we're working on some stuff, and then the bell rings and I'm rushing to go get my coat with all the other kids. Everybody's running to the front, get their coats so we can go out to recess. And there's 3 boys who are making fun of me, and they're all saying, you don't know how to add. You don't know anything. You can't even add 1 + 1 + 1. She says, and I'm crying. They're so mean, those boys. So here started her phobia of math and her fear of it. And it's also locked in from all these children running towards the place to get the coats and all this happening at the same time. So what I did with her was have her make the boys get really, really small. So they're really tiny and their voices are all icky and squeaky. And they said, those boys are a bunch of idiots. You could just flick them out of here if you want. And then now I want you to find something to fly away on. So she found a Pegasus that was all rainbow colors. And she's flying away above all that on this Pegasus. So what I'm doing in her brain is totally changing how she holds those memories. We're not just visualizing Pegasuses, we're changing her power and their weakness. And while she's flying around, I'm saying, math, 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 you're smart. You know, you're smarter than those guys. You're good at math and you always have been. And now you're going to love it. And that was it. This horrible problem that her parents had for the last couple of years was gone.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
It's hypnosis. Yeah, I mean, you're hearing it here. Hypnosis works for all sorts of people. And it's really an incredible thing. Finally, I want to touch on one thing. We're going to talk about something real briefly. It's something that arouses Wendi and myself, both of us. No, I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about sailing, the other F word. And
Yes.
I just before the interview, she told me she has a book about it too. I was like, oh my God, too, because I knew that about Wendi and we were talking about it. And you also have written this book about journaling down in the Caribbean and wherever. Talk about that. Talk about sailing in general, whatever.
Well, I've always wanted to have a catamaran, and I went to France many years ago to look at the Lagoon catamaran, which is made in France. And I didn't quite ever get it together. And one day I decided to do it, just to do it and to buy a catamaran. And on the sailing forum online, I would look at it there and talk to people about it. And I finally narrowed it down to this one that I knew the two people who owned it somewhat online. And so they were in Croatia, they were done, and I bought it from them. There were a few pitfalls along the way, but I had someone sail it to the Canary Islands because every year there's a rally of like 250 boats that all sail together from the Canaries to the Caribbean, to Rodney Bay.
Wow.
And so I did that. I hired a crew online. What could go wrong with that?
Wow. How many in the crew?
There was a couple that were Dutch, and there was one guy from Australia, John. So there were 3 crew.
And you.
Yeah. So I had 3 people that I didn't know, except we did some Skyping online, come on my boat. And it was great fun, except sometimes it got a little difficult because Ellie and Gijs being Dutch, I didn't know, but that's typically a different mindset than mine, like the opposite. So I would put on music. I would put on music and say, hey, dance party. And she says, no music on this boat. No. I said, what? No music? She says, no, we don't like music. We've already listened to all that music on the islands. No music. And then a little bird flew onto the boat. We're 1,000 miles out in the Atlantic. This little bird is here and it's cold and it's wet. And I hold it in my hands. And says, you let that bird go. You get rid of that bird. I said, it's okay. I'm just going to keep it warm because, it's got nowhere else to go. But she actually scolded me like I was a child a lot. And she was younger than me. So.
And you were the captain too. It was like, a mutiny.
Yes, indeed. So there's a lot to the story, but in my cabin, I would just type every night as if someone was actually listening to me, because that really helped me. And for the most part, we did all get along pretty good. But then the last 6 days, there were squalls and storms, and we thought we were going to die almost every day because it just wouldn't fucking quit. The waves were so big and we couldn't turn into the wind because the waves were from behind us and it would capsize us with a catamaran. So we had to keep going and but I typed. So the book hasn't been published yet. It's finished, it's edited, just needs to get published now.
Wow. All right.
But what I learned in those last 6 days, thinking that my life might be over.
When was this? When was this trip?
Oh, this is now, it's 2018.
Okay, so it was pretty recently.
No, not 2018. It was 8 years ago. So
you've been sailing for quite some time, but this was relatively recently, this trip.
Yeah, within like 7, 8 years ago.
But still,
it was the only rally that the ARC has had. They have them every year. It's the only one they had that had any squalls or storms. And they said, you might see one tiny little squall on the trip. You can sail a bathtub across the Atlantic.
It terrifies me. And I'm an ex-paratroop solo sailor. It terrifies me, man. Being out in the middle of nowhere, truly nowhere, squalls.
Yeah. And you can't be rescued. You can't. You're too far out. There's no range for any rescue equipment to get to you. And if there was a big tanker ship or something, being rescued by them will kill you because it just is too hard to do. It's not, so you're shit out of luck. But it did teach me a lot because the ending of it, coming into shore at Rodney Bay and, getting off the boat was a very exhilarating experience and really exciting, but also it was the most courageous thing I ever had to do.
Awesome.
Once we got off that boat and what I was going to unload on these 3 people and what they did, that was the most horrific thing that nobody should do to a person. So anyway, I did that. And then that ensued in having 4 policemen on my boat who were there for 5 hours.
What? Oh my God, I didn't even see this part coming, man. Wow.
Fun just begins. Yeah, they were there just to get them off my boat because the twists and turns that happen in this.
Wow.
But anyway,
What a
I'm
story.
so glad I did it. I'm still really grateful I did it. Experience of a lifetime. Turned me into...
Wow, what a fantastic interview this has been. We've covered some great, awesome stuff. You are awesome, Wendi. I really appreciate it. And let's just say have our ending. Do you have? Oh, I understand you have a free gift for the listener or the viewer. Is that correct?
I do. If you go to the website at wendi.com, there's 2 things. First of all, the coupon code to take 30% off of anything on the site is off the cuff. Make it all one word, off the cuff. And then there is a free self-hypnosis training in there. And if you want to send me an email, I'll give you the link to get it for free. So my email is wendi@wendi.com. Just spell Wendi with an I, WENDI, at wendi.com. And I'll send you the link for free for the self-hypnosis course so you can learn how to use your brain for good.
Wendi, you have been a fantastic, remarkable guest. I really appreciate it. Please go to Wendi's website. That's wendi.com. You get this great discount. And that's, all these things that you offer the person that wants to do personal development and self-help and improve themselves is awesome. But I'm also looking forward to that book.
I'm going to send it. I'll send you the PDF.
Oh, I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then I need to figure out next, do I need to just find a publisher, self-publish it, or an agent? And that part, I'm not real clear on what I'm supposed to do next, but maybe or someone out there knows that wants to just help take it to the next step.
Contact either one of us and let Wendi know if you know something about that. Wendi, thank you very much. Would you like to say goodbye to the audience?
Yes. And thank you, Tony. You are amazing. We've had so much fun. The energy is amazing. And thank you to everyone who stuck with it to hear this. And I hope you're inspired, or that you're going to inspire someone else and help get out of some really icky places in your life and love your life again.
Thank you very much, Wendi. And remember, listener and viewer, every one of us is responsible for ourselves, and we can all use some help. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. Remember to visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Self-Help Coaching Podcast.